Good morning, I'm Morgan Donner, and today I'd like to show you how I make this 1920s one-hour dress. Now, you may have noticed those quote marks because the pattern is called the one-hour dress. It does not necessarily mean that you are going to take only 1 hour to make it, or at least I certainly didn't. It took me maybe 3 hours, which is still pretty fast. So let me go ahead and show you it. So the 1920s are not necessarily my area of expertise. Not that I have any expertise in any area, but it's definitely not a time that I know a whole lot about. So I started off this project the way I did pretty much every other project, which is to look at a Pinterest board. I found lots of really cute dresses. I wanted something that felt very normal day-to-day type clothing when it comes to 1920s. And there are lots of really cool street photography images showing women just about the town. The ones with coats are kind of frustrating because I knew I wasn't gonna make a coat, but there are several with cute little dresses. One thing that I noticed right away is it seems very common to be wearing a hat. So I ordered that from the internet, so I didn't have to make it. But for the dress, I stumbled across this, I think French magazine of some sort that showed several kind of how to make your own dresses patterns. It gave sort of ideas and hints. It wasn't full on cut it out and put it on the paper patterns. No, it was more like take your waist, bust, hip, height measurements and toss that onto the fabric and cut out a dress. There's some kind of news article about a woman who reportedly made a dress in like 48 minutes or something, and which is super cool. And I was like, you know what? I only have one afternoon. That seems like that fits the bill. And the dress pattern, in truth, is very simple. It's really whatever length you want your sleeves to be. The sleeves are cut on one. They are not cut with a separate seam. It's literally just a T. Then the whole waist, which if you're familiar with 1920s, usually you don't have much fitting in the waist. It's more of a straight down until you hit the hips. And then you have some flare going on in the skirt. Not a lot, but there's definitely a lot of swishy movement. There's tons of images of women with lots of pleats and gathers in the skirt. Sometimes they had lots of fun and did different fabrics in the gores, and it's very cute. Digging through my closet, I found this polka dot fabric, and I knew I had seen a couple images of ladies wearing dresses with a sort of polka dot type fabric, and I was like, all right, I think that'll work. You may have heard me in the past advocate for doing a mock-up, and even for something as simple as this, I still recommend it. So I went ahead and did a quick mock-up to verify that the instructions, which said to use the bust as your main measurement for the whole torso column, whether that would work out, and it did. It was perfectly fine. There's some gathering and pleating in the hips, and I wanted to verify that I had the right height sorted out. I wanted to verify the length of the gown. My mock-up was way too short, but I also knew that. I only had so much fabric, and I figured it would at least give me a ballpark to show how much longer it needed to be kind of a more appropriately 1920s length. One of the great things about using a mock-up for this pattern is that I could then just take the mock-up and put it down on top of the fabric laid out. I didn't have to re-measure and draw the various measurement components, which was fantastic. I love it when I can cut corners like that. So good. The one-hour dress, at its most simple, uses a sort of capital I shape. I chose quite short sleeves, but you could certainly make your sleeves longer, or you could make your hips wider if you wanted more fullness in the skirt, but at its core, it's quite a simple garment. After flipping the dress inside out, I'll sew the side seam first, stopping at the hips. I have lots of thread colors, but no dark blues at the moment apparently. I guess I'll have to use black instead, but that's okay, it shouldn't show too much. Now here's where the side seam meets hip, and I could just fold it like this to make a sort of large pleat, which would definitely be the fastest method, but I really like these extant examples I've seen with the gathered hips. So I'll cut perpendicularly to the side seam, going about 2 inches in. And then this excess skirt here on the bottom needs to be gathered up into the short opening at the top. I could gather it by machine, but with just a foot or so of stitching, I'll just do it by hand. It'll honestly be just as fast. Once the lower section is about the same size across as the ungathered top, I can just pin them together and then run them through the sewing machine. And here's what that looks like on the outside of the dress. The neckline and the sleeve edges are still unfinished, so let's go ahead and get those taken care of. For binding the sleeves and for the eventual belt sort of sash, I have some white silk that I need to cut down into smaller strips. I've cut a 2-inch wide strip for the sleeves, no fancy bias here, just straight grain. I'll fold it in half and then stitch it down to the sleeve edge. After sewing that first line of stitching for the binding, I'll iron it downward. We're looking at the outside of the sleeve here. And then flip it over, and on the inside, fold it over again towards the inside and iron it down again. The idea here is that I want the binding on the inside, the little white section here, to be a little bit wider on the inside than it is on the outside. The reason why is because when I switch it over to the machine here, I'm going to stitch just barely not on the visible white binding on the front, which means that hopefully, with all good skill and luck, I will be catching the back side of the binding. There we go. See the little stitches in a row? Normally I'd prefer to do this by hand, but I don't have a lot of time today, so we're just rushing it along. Now for the neckline, you can see here that I've rolled the edge down twice and incorporated the binding in that. It's a little bit bulky, and I probably should have done the neckline first and then did the sleeve binding, but it's okay. It's all fine in the end. So I will continue doing my 2-fold sewing. Normally I would pin the whole thing in place before doing any stitching, but it's a lot faster, especially for a straight seam like this, to go ahead and just pin the first bit to keep things in place while you're getting set up. But after that, you can use the fact that this fabric is a non-stretch, and you can sort of use a little bit of tension to hold that double fold in place while you're sewing. Oh goodness! It's 5 o'clock and my friends are coming at 6 to pick me up for this party, so I need to get moving here. The binding was just a little bit too thick to go through the machine, so I'm tacking it down by hand. And then while I still have the thread and needle already in place, I'll go ahead and stitch the other end of the sleeve together so that the sleeve is just bound together at the very edge. Ta-da! I do kind of wish that I had made the opening in the binding here on the underside of the arm so that it was just one continuous length, not broken up by this bit of stitching, but it's okay, not the end of the world. Do remember to clip all of your corners inside the dress. There's going to be at least one under each arm, and that'll help it move correctly once it's on the body. With the neckline done, I'm going to try the dress on very quickly, and here where my bra straps are, I've placed a couple of pins on the back panel of fabric, and that's going to tell me where to start my neckline. So here's that bra strap pin, and it's on the back half. I'm actually, instead of going to evenly pin it together, I'm going to sort of zhuzh one side down. What that's going to do is make it so that the neckline in the front is going to be a little bit more roomy, a little bit further down than the neckline in the back, which if you've done any sewing or if you just go look at any of your t-shirts right now, you'll note that the neckline is always more in the front than it is in the back. Or I should say, it's a little bit lower in the front than it is in the back. Otherwise, you end up slightly feeling like the fabric is rubbing up against your neck too much. You definitely want a little bit more room in the front. Now that I've got the placement, I'll just do a few quick stitches to connect the front and back panel. I'm not going to sew all the way down to the sleeve, just this little point here. It's inspired mostly by this particular magazine inspiration image, which I thought was super cute the way it was just attached to the shoulders. I went ahead and also attached a point at the sleeves for a slightly different but similar look. I do hope that there's someone out there who is totally geeking out and appreciating my attempt at historical nail polish. After sewing the other side, you can see now that the neckline opening is straight on the back, but a little bit more open in the front, which again will be more comfortable in the end. Last thing to finish up here is the hem. I'm just going to do a quick double fold and then toss it through my hemming foot on the machine. I am a very big fan of the hemming foot. I wish that I had more of them in wider widths, but I've just got this little tiny narrow one, and it makes the cutest little dinky hems. I love it. The dress itself is pretty much done, but I do want to add a quick little decorative sash out of a matching fabric. I think it'll help pull the whole look together. It seems to be a pretty common element for 1920s girls to have some sort of belt, sash, or even the same fabric as the dress itself, but some kind of element around the hips. After stitching the entire length of the sash down, I've left a little opening here, which I'm going to use to try and pull the whole thing right side out. Normally this is quite a tricky task for any project, but the silk is so slinky, it just slides against itself really nicely, so yay! Even being short on time, I cannot leave it to be all lumpy like this, so I'm going to give this a quick ironing to make everything flat and nice. With the sash done, we'll go ahead and tie it on just above, or right at, really, that gathered section of the skirt that we put in earlier. After a bit of zhuzhing and arranging, I've got a cute little bow. So I hope you guys really enjoyed watching me make the dress. If you have any questions, do feel free to leave them below in the comments. If you attempt to make your own 1920s 1-hour dress, I would love to see that. I'm a big fan. Do please tag me on Instagram at Morgan Donner. I love seeing all your guys' things. It was lots and lots of fun to research something that was so completely out of my normal historical clothing research comfort zone. It was really neat to see something so different and new. Who knows what I'll decide to look up next. I do still need to do those Janet Arnold stays. Well, I think that just about wraps it up, so I hope you guys all have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll see you later. Good night. That just about wraps everything up, so I hope you guys all have a lot of fun. Oh, it got real weird with the accents there.